Hi everyone, it's your friend Doris the Coder back with another video. If you are new to my channel, I welcome you. And if you are returning, thank you so much for coming back. Today we're going to talk about why for professional billing, you often have more than one CPT code to reflect what looks like the exact same service. I'll do another video talking about professional versus facility, but we're not going to talk about that in this video, although that could be a reason why you have two codes for a service. There's really two considerations for proper coding and explanations for why you have two codes. One, you want to ask yourself, who are you reporting for, right? There are some codes in HCPCS, for example, that can be used only on the facility claim, and some codes that can only be used on the professional claim, and some that kind of bounce across the book. Now, ICD-10 PCS is a coding system that is only used on the facility claim, the UB92, UB04 claim. And the CMS 1500 form is the only option we have on the professional side for reporting our charges. But when it comes to the codes that go on them, HCPCS is kind of where we intersect. We would never use PCS codes on the professional side, but a facility might, depending on what they're reporting for and that patient status, could reasonably maybe use some CPT codes there. So on the professional side, why do we have two codes? The first thing, again, we need to think about is if we are reporting those claims for the provider, then we want to only use those services that are reflective of the provider work. And then the second is really important as well, and that's who are we reporting the services to? I'll split this just to say Medicare and Medicaid. And to fully understand this, you have to understand some of the history behind your codes and your code books. For clarity, I'm going to refer to these with their more commonly recognized terms instead of the proper terms. So I'm going to say HCPCS level, instead of HCPCS level 1 and level 2 codes, I'm going to call them CPT and HCPCS codes. So on the professional side, we might reasonably use a CPT code, which is a 5-digit code like the one you see on the screen here, 93,000, or we could use a 5-character code that's alphanumeric that starts with a letter and then has 4 numbers that follow these. These are your HCPCS level 2 codes. So on the professional claim, depending on who I am reporting the service to and what kind of service it is, I may have to, for an EKG that's part of an initial preventative physical examination, I may need to report that with G0403 and not 93000. From a documentation standpoint, keep in mind your documentation won't look any different because the documentation should reflect an EKG routine 12 lead. They both indicate the interpretation and report for a 12-lead EKG. The difference is, and why you have two codes, is CMS authors and can update HCPCS codes. CPT, the American Medical Association, is the author, publisher, and the one responsible for updating CPT codes. When the AMA is creating and updating CPT codes, at those meetings, there are often representatives from the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And there are times where the intention of the code, how it should be used, and the guidelines that go with it are written by CPT, but CMS doesn't necessarily agree with it and they desire changes. When the AMA and CMS can't agree on those changes, CMS then uses their authority to author codes in the HCPCS system. When that happens, we see situations like 93000 and G0403 for the same service on a professional claim that could be reported different ways. So even though the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services should include Medicare and Medicaid, you have to be really careful in your claims processing because you might find that Medicare doesn't pay that service, but you're getting paid with Medicaid with the CPT code. But you can't get paid from Medicare with the CPT code. So that's a really important point to pause on for both the coders when you're reporting, because that could affect how you report that service. And it isn't properly reported if you haven't factored the payer that has a payer variance. For billing, you want to factor that as well. Same thing for auditing. For billing, you want to factor that as well. And collections, because just because you got a denial for 93000 saying service not payable, it may not mean that the service is not payable. It may mean the CPT code you're reporting for that service is not payable. And if you use the alternate HCPCS codes that says the same thing and you meet the criteria for it, you can report that and have that service be paid. Now, it's important to note the criteria, because why would we have two codes? Typically, when CMS can't get their way, they want to add additional data to the code that the AMA just doesn't agree with. We saw that this year with the codes G2212 and 99417. Same code. Well, what was the disagreement? 99417 has the new codes for E&M office and other outpatient services have a range of time in it. So it might say 40 to 54 minutes, for example, right? So 40 is the lowest, 54 is the highest. If you fall within that range, you get that code 99205. Well, when they decided to add the code for prolong and decide when it was appropriate to use the prolonged service, it was CPT's intention that once you got to the 15-minute mark beyond the 40 minutes or the 55th minute, you would be able to report the 99417. CMS came in and said, no, 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 no. Since that includes a range of time, we'll click this code. We think it should be beyond the maximum time. So that same code that was 40 to 54 minutes with CPT that I could add 15 minutes starting from the 40-point mark, CMS said, no, you can add 15 minutes starting from the end point mark. And because they couldn't agree with that, CMS used its authority to create the HCPCS code G22112. So you'll see examples like that all throughout. I mean, depending on the specialty that you code, you could very well see that. So before your claims get adjusted because you think they're not payable, make sure you check both coding systems. This is how providers can somewhat mess themselves up when they feel like we're not going to buy a HCPCS book because we don't use a lot of them. They're not certain really what they use until they really investigated those code books. Also, HCPCS don't often have a lot of guidelines in them. So this is why we see the codes include more verbiage than what we see in the CPT. It's not that there's really a variation. For example, I can't use 99354 on the same day, and I can't use 99358 on the same day with the CPT code either. But that's covered and included in the guidelines, and we don't see a lot of guidelines in our HCPCS book because literally they're just copy codes that's modified to fit the intention of the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So if you ever wonder and you're coding, why are there two codes for that? That's why. Thanks for joining my channel. Remember to like and subscribe. I post as often as I can, and I'll see you in the next video. Until the next time, I'm Doris the Coder signing out. Okay, before you go, so 99417 and G2212, if you need a little more clarity on the time definitions related to E&M, check out the video on this page titled, What Time Is It? 3 Time Definitions in E&M. See you in the next one.